When Elon Musk brought his 8-year-old son Xavier to a homeless shelter, nobody expected the boy to say something that would leave everyone in tears. The richest man in the world thought he was teaching his son about helping others. But Xavier had his own secret reason for being there. A reason that would shock his father and change both their lives forever. At breakfast time, Xavier walked to the center of the room. Homeless families stopped eating to listen. Shelter workers put down their coffee cups. Even Elon had no idea what was coming. When Xavier opened his mouth and spoke from his heart, something magical happened. Tough adults who had survived losing everything began crying. Workers who thought they had heard every sad story wiped their eyes. His own father broke down completely. But what could a little boy possibly say to move a room full of strangers? To tears? And what secret was Xavier hiding that his billionaire father never knew about? The breakfast rush at Hope Haven Shelter was always the busiest time of day. Steam rose from big pots of oatmeal while children lined up with their bowls. The smell of toast and coffee filled the air. Maria Santos wiped her hands on her apron and looked around the crowded room with tired but caring eyes. She had run this shelter for 15 years. Every morning was the same. Families eating together at long tables, kids laughing and playing between bites, parents talking quietly about job interviews and apartment searches. It was organized chaos, but it was home for 63 people who had nowhere else to go. Then the front door opened. Maria looked up and nearly dropped the stack of plates she was carrying. Walking through the door was a tall man in a simple black t-shirt and jeans. His face was one she had seen on TV and in magazines countless times. Behind him, holding his hand, was a small boy with curious eyes. "Is that?" whispered Jenny, one of the volunteer servers. "Elon Musk," Maria breathed. The room didn't notice at first. The breakfast routine continued. Children asked for more juice. Parents helped tie shoes and wipe faces. But slowly, like ripples in a pond, people began to turn and stare. Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, here in their humble shelter. Maria walked over on shaky legs. She had met mayors and city council members. She had given tours to wealthy donors, but she had never met someone this famous. Her heart pounded as she approached. "Mr. Musk," she said quietly, "I'm Maria Santos. I run Hope Haven." Elon smiled warmly and shook her hand. "Please call me Elon. This is my son, Xavier." He put his hand on the boy's shoulder. "We were hoping we could have breakfast with everyone, if that's okay." Maria blinked. She expected cameras. She expected reporters. She expected some kind of big announcement. Instead, here was a father and son asking to eat oatmeal with homeless families. "Of course," she said. "But may I ask why you're here?" Elon glanced down at Xavier, who was already looking around the room with wide eyes. "My son has some things he wants to say, and I have some things I need to learn." Before Maria could ask what that meant, Xavier let go of his father's hand. The 8-year-old walked straight to a table where 3 children were eating breakfast. Their parents watched nervously as this well-dressed boy sat down next to their kids. "Hi," Xavier said simply. "Can I eat with you?" The children looked at each other, then at their parents, then back at Xavier. A girl with pigtails smiled. "Sure, I'm Rosa. This is my brother Carlos and my friend Tommy." "I'm Xavier," he said, sitting down as if he belonged there. Maria watched in amazement. No awkwardness, no fear, just children being children. Elon walked over and sat down too. Soon he was talking with Rosa and Carlos's mother about her job search. Tommy's father told him about fixing cars. The conversation flowed naturally, like old friends catching up. Other families started to relax. Some came over to introduce themselves. The word spread quickly through the room, but instead of chaos, there was a warm buzz of excitement. Then Xavier stood up. The room grew quiet. All eyes turned to the small boy in the center of the breakfast area. Even the kitchen staff stopped what they were doing to listen. Xavier looked around at all the faces watching him. Children with crumbs on their cheeks. Parents holding coffee cups. volunteers with serving spoons still in their hands. His father, sitting at the table, watching him with curious eyes. Xavier took a deep breath and began to speak. His voice was clear and strong for such a small person. The first words he said made several people gasp. As he continued talking, something incredible happened. Tough parents who had survived losing their homes started wiping their eyes. Volunteers who had heard every sad story imaginable began crying, openly. Maria Santos, who thought she had seen everything in 15 years of running the shelter, felt tears streaming down her face. Her hands shook as she covered her mouth. Even Elon, sitting at the table with the other parents, had tears in his eyes. But his expression was different. He wasn't just moved by his son's words. He looked proud, and maybe a little surprised. When Xavier finished speaking, the room was completely silent, except for the sound of people crying. Not sad crying, something deeper, something that touched the very center of what it means to be human. Xavier walked back to his father. Elon put his arm around his son's shoulders and pulled him close. Maria walked over to them, still wiping tears from her eyes. She looked at Elon with complete shock and amazement. "Now you understand," Elon whispered to her. "Why we're really here." But what had Xavier said that moved everyone to tears? What words from an 8-year-old boy could touch the hearts of so many people who had already been through so much? That story would have to wait. 3 weeks earlier, the mansion felt too big and too quiet. Elon walked through the long hallway, his footsteps echoing off the marble floors. Outside, the lights of Austin twinkled like stars, but inside, the house felt empty. He found Xavier in the kitchen, sitting alone at the huge dining table. A plate of chicken and vegetables sat in front of him, barely touched. Xavier pushed the food around with his fork, not really eating. "How was school today?" Elon asked, sitting down across from his son. Xavier shrugged. "Fine." It was always the same answer. Fine. Everything was always fine with Xavier lately. But Elon could see it wasn't true. His son looked sad, even though he had everything a kid could want. The house had a movie theater, a swimming pool, a game room with every video game ever made. Xavier had his own computer, his own tablet, his own phone. He went to the best private school in Texas. He took piano lessons and art classes and swimming lessons, but he still seemed lonely. "Want to watch a movie tonight?" Elon asked. "Maybe later," Xavier said. "I have homework." Elon nodded, but he knew. Xavier would just go to his room and play games by himself. That's what he did every night. Ever since his mother moved to Europe for her new job, Xavier had become more and more quiet. They ate in silence for a while. The only sounds were their forks hitting the plates and the quiet hum of the air conditioning. Finally, Xavier looked up. "Dad?" he said softly. "Yeah? Why do some kids not have homes?" The question caught Elon off guard. He stopped chewing and looked at his son. Xavier's eyes were serious, waiting for an answer. "Well," Elon started, then stopped. "How do you explain homelessness to an 8-year-old? Sometimes people lose their jobs, or they get sick and can't work, or maybe they don't have family to help them. But where do they sleep?" Xavier asked. "Some stay in shelters, some sleep in their cars, some..." Elon trailed off. He realized he didn't really know. Despite all his success, despite all the problems he had solved with rockets and electric cars, he had never really thought about where homeless people slept. "That's sad," Xavier said quietly. "Yes, it is." Xavier put down his fork. "Do kids sleep in cars too?" Elon felt his chest tighten. "Sometimes." "Yes." "With their parents?" "Yes." Xavier was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, "Are they scared?" Elon looked at his son across the big table. Xavier's face was full of worry for people he had never met. kids who were sleeping in cars while Xavier had a bedroom bigger than most apartments. I think they might be, Elon said honestly. That night, Elon stood in Xavier's doorway and watched his son get ready for bed. Xavier brushed his teeth in his own bathroom. He had his own walk-in closet full of clothes. His bed was covered with soft blankets and stuffed animals. But Xavier didn't seem happy about any of it. Instead, Xavier walked to his bedroom window and pressed his face against the glass. He stared out at the city lights below, looking like he was searching for something. "What are you looking at?" Elon asked. "Just wondering," Xavier said softly. "Wondering where all the kids without homes are sleeping tonight." Elon felt something break inside his chest. His son was 8 years old and worried about children he had never met. Meanwhile, Elon was so busy making money and building companies that he never thought about the people who needed help right in his own city. "Dad?" Xavier said, still looking out the window. "Yeah? Do you think they dream about having a house like ours?" Elon didn't know what to say. He walked over and put his hand on Xavier's shoulder. "I don't know, buddy. Maybe. I dream about them. Sometimes," Xavier whispered. "The kids without homes. I dream that I'm trying to help them, but I don't know how." That night, after Xavier fell asleep, Elon couldn't stop thinking about their conversation. He walked through his huge house, looking at all the things he owned. The expensive art on the walls, the fancy furniture, the rooms they never even used. He had worked so hard to give Xavier everything, but somehow he had missed the most important thing. Xavier didn't need more stuff. He needed to understand the world around him. And maybe, Elon realized, so did he. The next morning, Elon found drawings on Xavier's desk. Pictures of children standing outside houses, looking in through windows. Pictures of families sleeping in cars. Pictures of kids who looked sad and alone. At the bottom of one drawing, Xavier had written in his careful second-grade handwriting, "I wish I could help them." That's when Elon made a decision that would change both their lives. Elon sat in his office the next morning, staring at Xavier's drawings spread across his desk. The pictures showed so much pain and hope at the same time. Children without homes, but drawn with careful love by a boy who wanted to help them. He picked up his phone and called his assistant, Rebecca. "I need you to find me some places," he said when she answered. "What kind of places, Mr. Musk?" "Homeless shelters, food banks, community centers, places where families go when they need help." There was silence on the other end of the phone. "Rebecca, you there?" "Yes, sir. I'm here. But may I ask why?" Elon looked at the drawing of a little girl standing outside a house. Xavier had drawn tears on her face, but he had also drawn a smile, like she was sad but still hopeful. "I want to take Xavier to see how other people live. Real people. People who are struggling." "You want to take an 8-year-old where?" Rebecca's voice went up an octave. "To homeless shelters, to meet families who don't have homes." "Sir, with all respect, that sounds unusual and maybe not safe for a child." Elon understood her concern. Most rich people kept their children away from poverty, not toward it. They built walls and gates to keep the hard parts of life out. "Rebecca, my son is asking questions I can't answer. He's worried about kids he's never met. He's losing sleep thinking about families sleeping in cars. I think he needs to see that there are good people trying to help. And maybe I need to see it too." "Okay," Rebecca said slowly. "I'll make some calls. But Mr. Musk, most of these places don't just let famous people walk in. They protect their clients' privacy." "Then don't tell them I'm famous. Just tell them a father wants to bring his son to volunteer or learn. Keep it simple." After he hung up, Elon walked upstairs to find Xavier. His son was in his room, but not playing video games like usual. Instead, he was sitting on his bed, drawing more pictures. "What are you working on?" Elon asked, sitting down beside him. Xavier showed him the new drawing. It was a picture of children eating at a long table. They looked happy, even though their clothes were old and torn. "They're sharing food," Xavier explained. "Even though they don't have much, they're sharing with each other." "How do you know that?" Elon asked. Xavier shrugged. "I just think that's what they would do. When you don't have much, sharing makes it feel like more." Elon stared at his son. Where did an 8-year-old learn wisdom like that? Xavier would, "You like to meet some of these kids? The ones you're drawing?" Xavier's eyes went wide. "Really? We could do that?" "I think so. We could visit places where families go when they need help. We could see how people take care of each other. And maybe we could help them too?" Maybe we could. That night at dinner, Xavier was different. He ate all his food and talked more than he had in weeks. He asked questions about homeless shelters and food banks. He wanted to know how old the IE kids would be and what they liked to do and whether they went to school. "Some of them probably go to different schools all the time," Elon explained. "When families move around a lot, kids have to change schools." "That must be hard," Xavier said, "making new friends all the time." "Yes, it probably is." "Well then, I'll be extra nice to them, so they feel welcome." Over the next few days, Rebecca set up visits to 3 different places: a food bank where families got groceries, a community center that served meals, and Hope Haven Shelter, where families could sleep when they had nowhere else to go. But something strange was happening with Xavier. The more excited he got about the visits, the more he seemed to be carrying some kind of secret. He would start to say something, then stop. He would look at Elon like he wanted to tell him something important, but then shake his head and walk away. His drawings changed too. Now they all included the same boy, a kid about Xavier's age with dark hair and sad eyes. The boy appeared in every single picture, sometimes in the background, sometimes right in the center. "Who's this?" Elon asked, pointing to the boy in the latest drawing. Xavier looked at the picture for a long time. "Just a friend," he said quietly. "A friend from school?" "No, a different kind of friend." "What kind of friend?" Xavier gathered up his drawings and held them close to his chest. "You'll see, Dad. When we go to the places, you'll see." "Xavier, is there something you want to tell me?" His son looked at him with eyes that seemed much older than 8 years. "Not yet, Dad, but soon. When we get to the last place, you'll understand everything." "The last place?" "The shelter. Hope Haven. That's where you'll understand." Elon felt a chill run down his spine. How did Xavier know the name of the shelter? Rebecca had just set up the visits yesterday. He hadn't told Xavier the names of any of the places they were going. "How do you know about Hope Haven?" he asked. Xavier clutched his drawings tighter. "Because that's where I met him, Dad. That's where I met my friend. And that's where I lost him." Before Elon could ask what that meant, Xavier ran to his room and closed the door. That night, Elon heard Xavier talking in his sleep. He stood outside his son's bedroom door and listened. "I'm sorry I couldn't help you," Xavier whispered in the dark. "I'm sorry you had to leave, but I'm coming back. I'm bringing my dad, and we're going to make it better. I promise." Elon's heart pounded. What had happened at that shelter? When had Xavier been there before? And who was the friend he kept drawing? Tomorrow, their journey would begin. But Elon was starting to realize that for Xavier, this wasn't the beginning of anything. It was a return. The Austin Food Bank was busy on Saturday morning. Cars lined up in the parking lot while volunteers carried boxes of food. Families waited patiently in the Texas heat, some with young children holding their parents' hands. Elon parked his simple black car away from the crowd. He didn't want to cause a scene. This day was about Xavier learning, not about him being recognized. "Ready?" he asked his son. Xavier nodded, but he looked nervous. He clutched a small backpack filled with his favorite snacks. Dad, what if they don't like me? Why wouldn't they like you? Because I have nice clothes and they don't. Elon's heart ached. His 8-year-old son was worried about making other people feel bad. Xavier, good people care about who you are inside, not what you are. Where? Just be yourself. They walked toward the building together. Xavier stayed close to his father's side, watching everything with wide eyes. He saw children his age helping their parents carry heavy bags of groceries to their cars. A volunteer named Mrs. Chen showed them around. She explained how families came twice a month to get food, how volunteers sorted donations and packed boxes, how everyone worked together to help their neighbors. Can we help pack boxes? Xavier asked. Of course. Mrs. Chen smiled. We can always use extra hands. They spent an hour putting cans of soup and boxes of cereal into bags. Xavier worked quietly beside other volunteers, asking polite questions about how much food each family needed. Then he saw her. A girl about his age was helping her grandmother carry a heavy box. The girl had long black hair and pigtails and was wearing a faded yellow dress. She looked tired but was smiling as she helped the older woman. Xavier watched them struggle with the box. Without asking his father, he ran over to help. Here, let me carry that, he said, taking one side of the box. The girl looked surprised but grateful. Thank you. I'm Luna. I'm Xavier. Together, they carried the box to a beat-up old car. Luna's grandmother, who introduced herself as Abuela Rosa, thanked Xavier in both English and Spanish. Do you come here a lot? Xavier asked Luna. Every 2 weeks, Luna said. Abuela works 3 jobs, but sometimes we still need help with food. Xavier didn't understand how someone could work 3 jobs and still not have enough money for food. In his house, food just appeared. The housekeeper filled the refrigerator. The cook made meals. He had never thought about where it all came from or how much it cost. What do you want to be when you grow up? Xavier asked. Luna's eyes lit up. A teacher. I want to help kids learn to read. What about you? Xavier thought about it. He had never really been asked that question. Adults always assumed he would take over his father's companies someday. I don't know yet. Maybe I want to help people too. Luna smiled. That's a good thing to want. They talked while Luna's grandmother finished getting groceries. Luna told him about her school and her friends. She loved math and reading. She wanted to go to college someday but worried about Abuela getting older. She takes care of me, but sometimes I think I should take care of her too, Luna said. Xavier looked at this girl who worried about her grandmother the same way he worried about homeless children. Luna had so little compared to him, but she seemed happy and kind. When it was time to go, Luna's grandmother hugged Xavier. Gracias. Mijo, she said. You have a good heart. As they walked back to their car, Xavier was quiet. He pulled his expensive Nintendo Switch out of his backpack and stared at it. Dad, can we go back to Luna? What's wrong? I want to give her this. Xavier held up the gaming device that cost more money than some families spent on groceries in a month. Elon started to object. Xavier, that's very expensive. You just got it for your birthday. But Xavier was already running back toward Luna's car. Elon followed, wondering what his son was thinking. Luna, Xavier called out. The girl turned around, surprised to see him coming back. I want you to have this, Xavier said, holding out the Nintendo Switch. It has lots of fun games on it. Luna stared at the device. Even at her age, she knew it was something very expensive. I can't take that, it's too much. Please, Xavier said. You need fun more than I do. Luna looked at her grandmother, who nodded slowly. If you're sure, Luna said softly. I'm sure. Luna took the gaming device carefully, like it was made of glass. Thank you, Xavier. This is the nicest thing anyone has ever given me. Xavier smiled bigger than Elon had seen him smile in months. On the drive home, Elon asked, "Why did you give Luna your Nintendo Switch?" Xavier looked out the window at the houses they passed. Some were big like theirs. Some were small and needed repairs. She shared her grandmother with me even though she was all Luna had. So I wanted to share something with her. But you loved that game. I love Luna more, Xavier said simply. She's my friend now. That night, Xavier drew another picture. This one showed him and Luna carrying the box together. But in the background, barely visible, was the same mysterious boy from all his other drawings. Xavier labeled the picture. 2 more days, Dad. 2 more days until what? Elon wondered. But somehow, he was afraid to ask. The Oak Hills community. Center smelled like soup and fresh bread. Families sat at round tables eating lunch while their children did homework in the corner. It was Wednesday afternoon, and this was the second stop on Xavier and Elon's journey to understand how people helped each other. A volunteer named Sarah showed them around. She explained how the center served free meals to anyone who needed them. No questions asked, no paperwork required, just people helping people. We serve about 200 meals a day, Sarah said. Families, elderly folks, people between jobs. Everyone is welcome. Xavier watched a man in the corner helping 3 children with their math homework. The man looked tired, and his clothes were wrinkled like he had slept in them. But he was patient with the kids, explaining each problem carefully. That's Marcus, Sarah whispered to Elon. Lost his job during the pandemic. He's been living in his car with his 3 kids for 6 months now, but he comes here every day to make sure they have a place to do homework. Elon felt his stomach drop. Living in a car, with children. Xavier was already walking over to their table. Hi, he said to the youngest boy, who looked about 6 years old. I'm Xavier. What's your name? The little boy looked up from his math worksheet. Tommy, are you here for lunch too? Yes, Xavier said, sitting down. Can I help you with your math? Marcus looked up, surprised. He saw Elon approaching, and his eyes widened slightly. He recognized him but didn't say anything. Instead, he just nodded at Xavier. Tommy's working on addition, Marcus said. Sometimes the numbers get confusing. Xavier sat next to Tommy and looked at the worksheet. I love math. Want me to show you a trick my teacher taught me? For the next hour, Xavier helped Tommy with his homework while Elon talked with Marcus. The man's story was heartbreaking, but told without self-pity. I worked at a hotel for 12 years, Marcus said. When COVID hit, they laid off most of the staff. I found 2 part-time jobs, but they don't pay enough for an apartment. Not in this city. Where do you sleep? Elon asked gently. We have a van. It's not much, but it keeps us together. The kids go to school every day. I make sure of that. And we come here for meals and homework time. Elon watched Marcus's 3 children. Tommy, the youngest. Maria, who was 8 like Xavier. And Jose, who was 10 and helped his younger siblings with their work. Despite everything they had been through, they were polite, helpful, and kind to each other. The hardest part, Marcus continued, isn't sleeping in the van. It's watching other kids have birthday parties and sleepovers that my kids can't go to. They pretend it doesn't bother them, but I know it does. Just then, Tommy jumped up from his chair. Dad, Xavier taught me how to do the hard problems. He ran to Marcus with his worksheet full of pride. Marcus looked at the perfect math homework and smiled. Great job, buddy. Tommy ran back to Xavier and did something that surprised everyone. He pulled a small package of crackers from his pocket and broke it in half. Want some? Tommy asked Xavier. They're cheese crackers, my favorite. Xavier looked at the crackers. He knew they were probably all Tommy had for a snack, maybe all he would have until dinner. But the little boy was offering to share them anyway. Thank you, Xavier said, taking half the crackers. These are really good. Tommy beamed. I always share with friends. Elon watched his son and this homeless child sharing crackers like it was the most natural thing in the world. Tommy had almost nothing. but he was giving half of what he had to someone he just met. "Your kids are amazing," Elon told Marcus. Marcus smiled sadly. "They don't know they're supposed to be bitter about what happened to us. They still believe in kindness, still trust people. I hope they never lose that." "Money can't buy what these kids have," Marcus continued, watching his children. "Hope and kindness? They don't know they're supposed to be angry at the world." Xavier listened to every word. When it was time to leave, he hugged all three of Marcus's children goodbye. Tommy made him promise to come back and help with math. Again. In the car, Xavier was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke. "Dad, Tommy shared his crackers with me even though he was hungry." "How do you know he was hungry?" "I could tell. But he shared anyway. Just like..." Xavier stopped talking. "Just like what?" "Just like my friend did. The one I told you about." Elon's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "The friend you met at Hope Haven?" "Yes. He shared his only toy with me even though it was broken. Just like Tommy shared his crackers." "Xavier, when were you at Hope Haven? I don't remember taking you there." Xavier looked out the window. "Last year, with Mom's charity group." Before she moved away, Elon felt a chill. Xavier's mother had never mentioned taking him to a homeless shelter. Why hadn't she told him? "What happened to your friend?" Elon asked carefully. Xavier's voice became very small. "When I came back to visit him, he was gone. Nobody knew where his family went. They had to leave because there wasn't enough room." "Oh, Xavier. I promised him I would come back with a better toy, but when I got there, he wasn't there anymore." Xavier's eyes filled with tears. "I never got to keep my promise." Now Elon understood. Xavier had been carrying this guilt for months. He had made a promise to a homeless child and hadn't been able to keep it. That's why he had been drawing pictures of sad children. That's why he worried about kids sleeping in cars. "What was his name?" Elon asked gently. "Diego," Xavier whispered. "His name was Diego, and he was my best friend for one day. Tomorrow, Dad. Tomorrow we go back to where I lost him." Xavier pulled out his phone and showed Elon a picture he had never seen before. Xavier standing next to another boy who looked remarkably similar to him, but wearing worn clothes and holding a broken toy robot. "Tomorrow, you'll understand everything," Xavier said. "Tomorrow, you'll meet Diego, I hope." That night, Elon couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the photograph Xavier had shown him. Two 8-year-old boys standing together, smiling at the camera. One dressed in expensive clothes, the other in a faded t-shirt with holes. But both boys had the same bright, happy expression. Diego, the friend Xavier had lost. Elon got up and walked quietly to Xavier's room. His son was sitting up in bed, looking at something in his hands. When Elon knocked softly, Xavier looked up. "Can't. Sleep either?" Elon asked. Xavier shook his head. He was holding the photograph of him and Diego, running his finger along the edge. "Can I sit with you?" Elon asked. Xavier nodded and moved over to make room on his bed. Elon sat down and looked at the picture again. "Tell me about Diego," he said gently. Xavier was quiet for a long moment. Then he began to speak, his voice soft in the darkness. "Mom took me to Hope Haven for her charity Christmas party. She said, I should see how other kids lived. I didn't want to go at first. I thought it would be scary." Xavier paused, still looking at the photo. "But when we got there, all the kids were so nice. They were playing games and sharing toys, even though they didn't have very many. That's when I met Diego." "What was he like?" Xavier smiled a little. "He was funny. He made jokes about everything, even living in the shelter. He said the best part was getting to meet new friends every day when new families came. That's a good way to look at it. Diego showed me around the shelter like he was giving me a tour of a palace. He introduced me to all the other kids. He made me feel welcome, even though I was just visiting and he actually lived there." Xavier turned the photo over. On the back, someone had written, "Xavier and Diego, best friends forever," in a child's handwriting. "Who wrote that?" Elon asked. "Diego did, right before I left that day. He said even though I was going home and he was staying, we would always be best friends." Elon felt his throat tighten. What happened next? We played together all afternoon. Diego had this toy robot that was broken. The arm was missing and it couldn't walk right, but he loved that robot more than anything. Xavier got up from his bed and went to his closet. He pulled out a box and brought it back to show his father. Inside was a brand new robot toy, still in its package. "I bought this with my allowance money right after I met Diego. I wanted to bring it to him to replace his broken one. Mom said we would go back to visit the shelter again soon." "But you didn't go back?" Xavier's eyes filled with tears. "Mom kept saying we would go next week or next month. Then she got the job in Europe and everything got crazy with moving and packing. I kept asking when we could visit Diego, but there was never time." "Oh, Xavier." "Finally, Mom said I could go visit by myself when she got back from her first business trip. But when we went..." Xavier's voice broke. "Diego wasn't there anymore." "What? Did they tell you?" "Maria, the lady who runs the shelter, said Diego's family had to leave because they didn't have enough beds for everyone. She said sometimes families have to go to different shelters or find other places to stay." Xavier wiped his eyes with his sleeve. "I asked if she knew where they went, but she didn't know. She said Diego left a message for me, though." "What was the message?" Xavier reached under his pillow and pulled out a piece of paper. It was a drawing of two boys playing with robots. At the bottom, in careful letters, Diego had written, "Thank you for being my friend. I hope I see you again someday. Your best friend, Diego." Elon looked at the drawing and felt his heart break for his son. Xavier had been carrying this sadness for months, blaming himself for not keeping his promise to a friend who had no idea that Xavier had tried to come back. "Xavier, it's not your fault that Diego had to leave. But I promised him, Dad. I promised I would bring him a new robot. And I never did. You tried. You bought the robot. You wanted to visit him. But it wasn't enough." Xavier looked at the unopened toy box. "Diego shared his broken robot with me even though it was the only toy he had. And I couldn't even give him this one." Xavier held up the photo again. "Diego taught me something important, Dad. He taught me that you don't have to have a lot to be happy, and you don't have to have a lot to share with others." "Is that why you gave Luna your Nintendo Switch?" Xavier nodded. "Diego would have shared his robot with Luna too, even though it was broken, so I wanted to share something good with her." They sat in silence for a while, looking at the picture of the two boys. "Dad?" Xavier said finally. "Yeah?" "When we go to Hope Haven tomorrow, do you think Diego might be back? Do you think some families come back to places where they were happy?" Elon didn't know what to say. He didn't want to give Xavier false hope, but he also didn't want to crush the little bit of hope his son still had. "I don't know, buddy. But even if Diego isn't there, maybe we can help other kids like him." Xavier nodded slowly. "That's what I've been thinking too. If I can't help Diego, maybe I can help other kids who need friends." "Is that what you want to do tomorrow?" Xavier looked at his father with those serious 8-year-old eyes. "I want to tell everyone at the shelter about Diego, about how he taught me to share and be kind. And I want to give them this robot, even if Diego isn't there to get it." "That sounds like a beautiful plan. And Dad?" "I want to tell them about you too, about how you're learning to see people the way Diego saw them, as friends who just need help." Elon felt tears in his own eyes. "How did you get so wise?" "Diego taught me," Xavier said simply. "Tomorrow, I'm going to teach everyone else what he taught me, even if it makes them cry." Xavier put the photo back under his pillow and lay down. "Tomorrow, you'll understand why meeting Diego changed my whole life. and why losing him made me want to help everyone. As Elon tucked his son into bed, Xavier whispered, "I hope Diego is proud of me tomorrow." "I'm sure he would be," Elon said. "I'm sure he would be very proud." But neither of them could imagine just how emotional tomorrow would be, or how Xavier's words would touch the hearts of everyone at Hope Haven Shelter. The morning of their visit to Hope Haven Shelter, Xavier woke up before his alarm. Elon found him sitting at the kitchen table, already dressed and holding the box with Diego's robot. "You ready for today?" Elon asked. Xavier nodded, but his hands were shaking a little. "Dad, what if I forget what I want to say? Just speak from your heart." That's what Diego would want. They drove through Austin in the early morning quiet. Xavier pressed his face to the window, watching the city wake up. Some people were walking to work. Others were waiting at bus stops. A few were sitting on park benches with shopping carts full of their belongings. "Do you think any of those people knew Diego?" Xavier asked. "Maybe," Elon said. "People without homes often know each other. They help each other. Like a big family." "Yes, like a big family." When they pulled up to Hope Haven Shelter, Xavier took a deep breath. The building looked exactly the same as it had a year ago. Same faded blue paint. Same sign with some letters missing. Same feeling of sadness and hope mixed together. "This is it," Xavier whispered. They walked to the front door together. Xavier carried the robot box carefully, like it was made of glass. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. The breakfast rush was in full swing when they entered. The smell of oatmeal and coffee filled the air. Children laughed and played between bites of food. Parents talked quietly about jobs and plans for the day. And there was Maria Santos, just like Xavier remembered. Older now, more tired, but still watching over everyone with kind eyes. When Maria saw Elon, her face showed the same shock as in Chapter 1. But when she looked at Xavier, something different happened. Her eyes grew wide with recognition. "Xavier?" she said softly. "Is that really you?" Xavier nodded, suddenly shy. "Hi, Miss Maria. I came back." Maria knelt down to his level. "I remember you. You came with your mother's group last Christmas. You played with all the children." "I came to ask about Diego," Xavier said quietly. Is he here?" Maria's face grew sad. She looked at Elon, then back at Xavier. "Oh, sweetie. Diego's family had to leave several months ago. We just didn't have enough space." Xavier's shoulders drooped. Even though he had expected this answer, hearing it still hurt. "Do you know where they went?" Xavier asked. "I'm sorry, honey. When families leave here, they sometimes go to other shelters, or stay with relatives, or..." Maria paused. "Sometimes we just don't know." Elon watched his son process this information. Xavier's face showed disappointment, but also something else, determination. "Miss Maria," Xavier said, "can I talk to everyone? All the kids and grown-ups eating breakfast?" "Of course, but why?" "Because I have something important to tell them, about Diego, about what he taught me." Maria looked confused but nodded. She had seen many things in her 15 years running the shelter, but she had never had an 8-year-old ask to address the whole room. "Everyone!" Maria called out. "We have a special visitor today. This young man has something he'd like to share with all of us." The room gradually grew quiet. Breakfast continued, but people turned their attention to the small boy standing near the entrance. Xavier looked around at all the faces watching him. Children with crumbs on their cheeks, parents holding coffee cups, volunteers pausing their work to listen. He saw families like Marcus and his children. Kids like Tommy who would share their last crackers with a stranger. People like Diego who found joy even when life was hard. Xavier walked slowly to the center of the room. Every step felt important, like he was walking towards something that would change everything. The room was completely silent now. Even the kitchen staff had stopped working to see what this boy wanted to say. Elon stood near the back, his heart racing. He still didn't know exactly what Xavier planned to say, but he could feel that it was going to be something powerful. Xavier stood in the center of the breakfast area, holding the robot box close to his chest. He looked small in the big room, but somehow his presence filled the entire space. He looked at his father, then at Maria, then at all the faces waiting to hear what he had to say. This was the moment from Chapter 1. This was when Xavier would speak the words that would make everyone cry. Words that would come from months of missing his friend, months of learning about kindness, months of carrying guilt and love and hope all mixed together. Xavier opened his mouth to speak. "My name is Xavier," he began, his voice clear and strong, despite his nervousness. "And my dad is very rich." The room stayed quiet, waiting to hear what would come next. "But I learned something from my friend Diego, who used to live here." And then Xavier began to tell them the most important lesson an 8-year-old had ever learned about what it really means to be wealthy. The lesson that would leave everyone in tears. The lesson that would change his father's life forever. The lesson that would transform Hope Haven Shelter and touch the hearts of everyone who heard it. The words were coming. The moment had arrived. Xavier stood in the center of the room, holding the robot box against his chest, like it was his most precious treasure. His voice was small at first, but it carried clearly through the silent breakfast area. "My name is Xavier, and my dad is very rich. But I learned something from my friend Diego, who used to live here." He paused, looking around at all the faces watching him. Children stopped eating. Parents put down their coffee cups. Even the volunteers in the kitchen doorway stood perfectly still. "Diego taught me that being rich isn't about how much money you have. It's about how much love you share." Xavier's voice grew stronger as he continued. "When I met Diego here last Christmas, he had almost nothing. His family lived in one small room. All his clothes fit in one bag. And he only had one toy, a broken robot with a missing arm." Xavier held up the box he was carrying. "But you know what Diego did? He let me play with his robot all day, even though it was broken, even though it was the only toy he had. He shared it with me because that's what friends do." A few people in the room began to wipe their eyes. Maria Santos covered her mouth with her hand. "Diego told me, Xavier, when you don't have much, sharing makes it feel like more." I didn't understand what he meant then, but I understand now. Xavier looked directly at his father. "Dad, I know you work really hard to make money. I know you want to give me everything. But Diego's family had to leave this place because there wasn't enough room for everyone. What if we could make sure no family ever has to leave? What if we could make this place big enough for everyone who needs help?" The room was so quiet you could hear people breathing. "I brought my piggy bank money today. It's 127 euros. That's everything I've saved since I was little. It's not very much compared to what Dad has. But Diego taught me that giving everything you have, even if it's small, is what makes you rich in your heart." Xavier walked over to Maria and pulled out a crumpled envelope from his pocket. His hands shook as he handed it to her. "This is for Diego's family, if you ever find them. And for all the other families who need help." Maria took the envelope, tears streaming down her face. "Xavier, honey, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," Xavier interrupted gently. "Because Diego shared everything with me, and I never got to share anything back with him." Xavier's voice began to crack with emotion. "I miss my friend Diego so much. He was only my friend for one day, but he changed my whole life. I couldn't save him from being homeless, but maybe we can save other kids like him." Xavier turned to face everyone in the room again. "I used to think being rich meant having the biggest house and the most toys. But Diego lived in a shelter, and he was the happiest person I ever met. He was happy because he had friends. He was happy because he helped other people. He was happy because he shared what he had. Tears were flowing freely throughout the room now. A mother at one table was sobbing quietly. A father near the wall wiped his eyes with his sleeve. Even some of the children were crying, though they might not have understood all the words. Diego taught me that love isn't about what you own. It's about what you give away. When he shared his broken robot with me, he was giving me the most valuable thing he had, his friendship. Xavier looked at the robot box in his hands. I bought this robot for Diego. I wanted to replace his broken one, but I never got the chance to give it to him. So today, I want to give it to all of you. Xavier set the box down in the center of the room. This robot is for any kid here who needs a toy. But more than that, it's a reminder of what Diego taught me. That the best things in life aren't things at all. They're the people who care about you, the friends who share with you, the love that grows when you give it away. Xavier's voice dropped to almost a whisper, but somehow everyone could still hear him perfectly. Maybe that's what being really rich means. Not having everything you want, but sharing everything you have. Not keeping love to yourself, but giving it to people who need it. Xavier looked one more time at his father, who was openly crying now. Dad, we have so much. Diego had almost nothing. But Diego was richer than us because he knew how to love. He knew how to share. He knew how to make other people happy. Xavier's final words came out broken with emotion. I couldn't keep my promise to Diego. I couldn't bring him this robot when he needed a friend. But maybe I can keep a different promise. Maybe I can help make sure other kids like Diego never have to leave their friends behind. Xavier wiped his nose with his sleeve. Diego, if you can hear me somehow, I want you to know that you made me rich. Not with money, but with love. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life sharing that love with other people, just like you shared your robot with me. The silence that followed was profound. It wasn't the absence of sound, but the presence of something much deeper. Love, understanding, the recognition that an 8-year-old boy had just taught a room full of adults the most important lesson about wealth and happiness. Maria Santos knelt down and hugged Xavier tightly. Diego would be so proud of you, she whispered. You learned exactly what he hoped you would learn. One by one, people in the room began to approach Xavier. Children hugged him. Parents shook his hand. Volunteers thanked him for reminding them why they chose to help others. But the person most affected by Xavier's words was his father. Elon stood at the back of the room, tears streaming down his face, finally understanding what his son had been trying to teach him all along. Being rich wasn't about what you could buy. It was about what you could give. And Xavier, with his $127 and his big heart, was the richest person Elon had ever known. For several minutes after Xavier finished speaking, no one moved. The breakfast room at Hope Haven Shelter felt like a church where something sacred had just happened. People wiped their eyes and looked at each other with new understanding. Maria Santos, who had run the shelter for 15 years and thought she had heard every heartbreaking story possible, knelt down in front of Xavier. Her voice shook when she spoke. Xavier, in all my years working here, I have never heard anything so beautiful. Diego taught you well, sweetheart. He would be so proud of the young man you've become. She looked at the crumpled envelope containing Xavier's life savings. But honey, you don't need to give us your money. What you've given us today with your words is worth more than any donation. Xavier shook his head. Diego shared his only toy with me. I want to share my only money with you. It's what friends do. A man at one of the tables stood up. His name was Robert, and he had been homeless for 3 months after losing his job. Son, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I've been angry at the world for what happened to me, but listening to you talk about your friend Diego, you've reminded me that I still have the most important thing. I still have love to give. A woman named Carmen, who was there with her 2 young daughters, wiped tears from her eyes. "My girls have been so sad since we lost our apartment, but you've shown them that we're still rich because we have each other." One by one, people began sharing how Xavier's words had touched them. Parents talked about teaching their children Diego's lesson about sharing. Volunteers spoke about remembering why they chose to help others. Even some of the children, though, they didn't understand all the big words, knew they had heard something special. But the person most affected was Elon. He stepped forward from the back of the room, tears still streaming down his face. The conversations quieted as people recognized him, but their focus remained on what he would say to his remarkable son. "Xavier," Elon began, his voice shaking with emotion, "you have taught me more about being successful than all my businesses ever could. I built companies to change the world, but you've changed me." Elon knelt down to Xavier's level, just as Maria had done. "If giving everything you have makes you rich in your heart, then you're the wealthiest person I know. You've shown me what I should have been doing with my success all along." Elon stood up and turned to Maria. "How much would it cost to expand this shelter so that no family like Diego's ever has to leave because there isn't enough room?" Maria looked shocked. "Mr. Musk, that would be, to truly solve the space problem it would cost millions of dollars." "How many millions?" Elon asked simply. "To build a facility that could house every homeless family in Austin who needs it? Maybe $15 to $20 million. But that's just for construction. Operating, costs, staff, programs." Maria's voice trailed off as she realized how impossible it sounded. Elon didn't hesitate. "Consider it done, and we'll establish a permanent fund to keep it running forever." The room erupted in gasps and whispers. People looked at each other in disbelief. Had they just witnessed someone commit $20 million to help homeless families? But Elon wasn't finished. "More than that," he continued. "Xavier and I will be back here every month, not for publicity, not for tax benefits, but to learn, to help, to remember what my son has taught me about real wealth." He looked around the room at all the faces staring at him. "I've spent my whole life building rockets to reach the stars, but my son has shown me that the most important journey is reaching into your heart and sharing what you find there with others." Xavier tugged on his father's shirt. When Elon bent down, Xavier whispered something in his ear. Elon smiled through his tears and nodded. He stood up and addressed the room again. "Xavier wants me to tell you something else. This shelter expansion, it's going to be called Diego's Place, because even though Diego had to leave, his lesson about sharing and kindness will live here forever." Maria Santos broke down completely. In 15 years of running Hope Haven, she had seen miracles of human kindness, but nothing like this. A homeless boy's friendship with a wealthy child had just transformed not only their lives, but the lives of thousands of families who would be helped in the future. "There's one more thing," Elon said. "I want to hire the best family search team in the country to find Diego and his family. Xavier's friend deserves to know what his kindness has created." Xavier's eyes lit up for the first time since entering the shelter. "Really, Dad? We can look for Diego?" "We can try, son. And even if we don't find him, we'll make sure his lesson lives on in every family that Diego's Place helps." The crowd began to applaud, slowly at first, then louder and louder. But Xavier wasn't paying attention to the clapping. He was thinking about Diego and hoping that somehow, wherever his friend was, he could feel the love that was filling this room. As the applause died down, families began to approach Elon and Xavier. They shared their stories, their hopes, their gratitude. Each conversation reinforced the lesson that dignity and dreams exist independent of bank accounts. A little girl named Sophie, about Xavier's age, came up to him shyly. "Xavier, I want to be like Diego when I grow up. I want to share things with people who need friends." Xavier smiled and hugged her. "Diego would like that. And you know what? You're already like Diego. You have a kind heart, and that's the most important thing." As the morning went on, Xavier played with the children at the shelter, helped serve food, and listened to stories from the adults. Every interaction reinforced what Diego had taught him, that happiness comes from connection, not possessions. Elon watched his son and realized that their roles had completely reversed. Xavier was now the teacher, and Elon was the student learning about what really mattered in life. When it was time to leave, Xavier didn't want to go. He had found something at Hope Haven that he had been missing at home, a sense of purpose. A way to honor his friend Diego, a place where his wealth of love mattered more than any amount of money. "We'll be back next week," Elon promised Maria. "This isn't a one-time visit. This is Xavier's classroom now, and mine too." As they walked to their car, Xavier looked back at the shelter one more time. "Dad?" he said. "Yeah, buddy?" "I think Diego is happy today. I think he knows that his sharing lesson is going to help a lot of kids." Elon put his arm around his son's shoulders. "I think you're right. And I think Diego is proud that he had such a good friend." Xavier smiled. For the first time in months, he felt truly happy. He had finally found a way to keep his promise to Diego after all. 6 months later. The morning sun shone brightly on the grand opening of Diego's place. What had once been a small shelter that could barely house 60 people was now a beautiful campus that could help over 300 families at a time. The new buildings had colorful murals painted by local artists, playgrounds where children could laugh and play, and gardens where families could grow their own vegetables. Xavier stood next to his father at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, wearing his favorite blue shirt and holding a pair of golden scissors. He looked different now than he had 6 months ago. Taller, more confident, but most importantly, happier. The sadness that had followed him around for so long was gone, replaced by a sense of purpose and joy. "Are you ready, buddy?" Elon asked, putting his hand on Xavier's shoulder. Xavier nodded, looking out at the crowd of people gathered to celebrate. There were families from the original Hope Haven shelter, city officials, volunteers, construction workers who had built the new facility, and reporters from local news stations. But Xavier wasn't nervous about all the attention. He had learned that speaking from the heart made everything else easy. Maria Santos stepped up to the microphone that had been set up for the ceremony. She looked out at the crowd and smiled. 6 months ago, a little boy came to our shelter and reminded us all what it truly means to be rich, she began. Today, because of that boy's wisdom and his father's generosity, we opened Diego's place, a home for any family that needs one. The crowd applauded as Maria continued. This facility will never turn a family away because we don't have room. Every child will have a safe place to sleep, a warm meal to eat, and most importantly, friends who care about them, just like Diego would have wanted. Xavier listened to Maria's words and thought about how much had changed since that emotional morning. In the old shelter, he and his father had visited every month, just as they promised. They had helped serve meals, played with children, and listened to stories from families working to rebuild their lives. Each visit had taught Xavier something new about kindness, strength, and hope. He had met single mothers working 2 jobs to support their children. Elderly people who had lost their homes but never lost their dignity. Teenagers aging out of foster care who were learning to live on their own. Every person had a story. Every story mattered. And every story reminded Xavier of the lesson Diego had taught him about sharing and caring for others. But the best part of the past 6 months wasn't the new building or the media attention. It was watching his father change. Elon had started, visiting other shelters and community centers around the country. He had funded job training programs, educational initiatives, and housing assistance projects. Most importantly, he had learned to see each person not as someone to help, but as someone with wisdom to share. "Xavier," Maria called from the microphone, "would you like to say a few words before we cut the ribbon?" Xavier looked up at his father, who nodded encouragingly. He walked to the microphone and looked out at all the faces watching him. 6 months ago, speaking to a crowd like this would have been scary. Now, it felt natural. "Hi, everyone," Xavier began, his voice clear and strong. "I'm Xavier, and I want to tell you about my friend Diego." The crowd grew quiet, just as the breakfast room had 6 months earlier. "Diego taught me that the best gifts aren't things you can wrap up in boxes. They're things you can wrap up in hugs, like friendship, like kindness, like making someone feel welcome when they're scared." Xavier paused, looking at the beautiful new buildings behind him. Diego never got to see this place, but his spirit lives here. Every time a family doesn't have to leave because there's no room, that's Diego's lesson working. Every time a kid shares a toy with someone new, that's Diego's lesson working. Every time someone chooses to help instead of looking away, that's Diego's lesson working. People in the crowd were already wiping their eyes. Xavier's ability to touch hearts hadn't diminished over the past 6 months. If anything, it had grown stronger. 6 months ago, I was sad because I thought I had lost my friend Diego. But I learned something important. You don't lose friends when they go away. You carry them with you in your heart. And when you share the love they gave you with other people, it's like they never really left. Xavier looked directly at his father, who was beaming with pride. "My dad taught me that money can build buildings, but Diego taught me that love builds families. This place has both. Money to keep everyone safe and warm, and love to make everyone feel like they belong." Xavier stepped closer to the microphone for his final words. "Diego, wherever you are, this is for you. Thank you for teaching me that being rich means having enough love to share. Thank you for showing me that the best way to keep a promise is to help someone else make one." The crowd erupted in applause as Xavier stepped back from the microphone. Elon and Maria joined him at the ribbon stretched across the entrance to the main building. "Ready?" Elon asked, handing Xavier one side of the scissors. Xavier nodded. Together, father and son cut the ribbon as cameras flashed and people cheered. The ribbon fell away, and the doors to Diego's place officially opened. Families began touring the new facility, marveling at the bright, cheerful rooms, the modern kitchen where healthy meals would be prepared, and the computer lab where children could do homework and adults could search for jobs. But as the celebration continued, something amazing happened. Xavier was standing near the entrance, greeting families as they explored their new temporary home, when he heard a familiar voice call out his name. "Xavier! Xavier! Is that really you?" Xavier turned around and saw something that made his heart stop. Walking toward him through the crowd was a boy about his age with dark hair and a bright smile. A boy who looked exactly like the friend in all his drawings. "Diego?" Xavier whispered. "Xavier!" Diego ran toward him, and the two boys hugged like they had never been apart. "I can't believe it's you," Diego said, tears of joy streaming down his face. "I saw your speech on the news. I told my mom, that's my friend Xavier. That's the boy who shared his whole day with me." Xavier couldn't speak. He just held on to his friend, afraid that if he let go, Diego might disappear again. A woman approached them, Diego's mother, Carmen. She looked at Xavier with grateful eyes. "You are the boy Diego never stopped talking about," she said. "After we had to leave the shelter," he kept saying. "I hope Xavier knows I'm okay. I hope he remembers what we learned together." Elon walked over, drawn by the commotion. When he saw the two boys hugging, he understood immediately who this must be. "Diego?" he asked softly. Diego looked up at the tall man he recognized from television and nodded shyly. "You're Xavier's dad. Xavier told me you were learning to be rich like him." Elon laughed through his tears. "I'm still learning, but your friend Xavier is an excellent teacher." Diego's mother explained that they had been living in transitional housing across town, and Diego had seen Xavier's speech on the local news. "He made me drive here today because he said his friend would be here, and he wanted to keep a promise." What promise? Xavier asked. Diego reached into his backpack and pulled out something that made Xavier gasp. It was the old broken robot from the shelter, but it looked different now. Someone had carefully repaired the missing arm and painted over the scratched places. I fixed it, Diego said proudly. Just like you helped fix things for other kids. I wanted to give you something special too, to say thank you for remembering me. Xavier took the robot carefully, running his fingers over the repaired arm. You fixed it yourself? My uncle taught me. He said if someone shares something precious with you, you should take good care of it. The two boys stood there holding their robots. Diego's repaired one and the new one Xavier had brought to the shelter 6 months ago, which had eventually found its way to another child who needed it. Diego, Xavier said, I never forgot you. Not for one day. You changed my whole life. You changed mine too, Diego replied. You taught me that friendship doesn't end just because someone goes away. It lives in all the good things you do after. The sun began to set over Diego's place. The two friends sat together on a bench in the new playground, watching other children play and laugh. Their parents talked nearby, making plans for regular visits and continued friendship. Xavier? Diego said as they watched the sunset. Yeah? I think we're both pretty rich now. Xavier smiled and looked around at all the families settling into their new temporary home, all the volunteers helping to serve dinner, all the children playing together regardless of where they had come from. Yeah, Xavier said. I think we're the richest kids in the world. And as the stars began to appear in the Texas sky, Xavier realized that Diego had been right all along. When you don't have much, sharing makes it feel like more. And when you have a lot, sharing makes it feel like everything. The story that had begun with a lost friendship had become a story about found purpose. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very patient, lost friends find their way back to you. To Diego's place would help thousands of families in the years to come. But the most important thing it housed wasn't beds or kitchens or classrooms. It was the proof that love shared is never lost, kindness given is never wasted, and promises kept in the heart can change the world. Xavier's simple words about sharing and kindness changed everything that day. His friendship with Diego proved that the richest people aren't those who have the most money, but those who give the most love. This story shows us that even the smallest acts of kindness can create big changes in the world. Just like Xavier learned from Diego, we all have something valuable to share with others. Where are you listening from today? Tell us in the comments below. We love hearing from friends all around the world who believe in spreading kindness just like Xavier and Diego. If this story touched your heart and reminded you what really matters in life, please hit that like button to help us share this message of kindness with more people. Subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell so you never miss stories that warm your heart and inspire you to make a difference in someone's life. Remember, you don't need millions of dollars to be rich in kindness. Every day, you have chances to be like Diego, to share what you have and make someone feel welcome. Click on the video appearing on your screen right now for another amazing story about how one small act of kindness changed everything. Keep spreading kindness, friends. The world needs more people like you.